And welcome to FoxNews.com, live on this Monday morning. The hour of the day, the headline for today is that the president is going to present his plan for cutting $1.5 trillion out of the budget. And as you can imagine, the Republicans are not too happy about it. Representative Paul Ryan, who heads the House Committee on Budget Committee there, I think, he said it's class warfare. Listen to what he said Sunday.
Class warfare, Chris, may make for really good politics, but it makes for rotten economics. If you tax something more, Chris, you get less of it. If you tax job creators more, you get less job creation. If you tax investment more, you get less investment.
All right, well, this is what we're dealing with today because he's got to cut $1.5 trillion out of the budget for the next 10 years. The super committee is going to have the same scenario, and this is basically what the president is saying is going to give them a starting point, and they've got to make this happen by Thanksgiving. So let's bring in the panel to talk about what this plan may propose and what the fight may actually consist of between Republicans and Democrats. Let me introduce the panel today. Ford O'Connell is the chairman of the CivicForumPAC and co-founder of Project Virginia. Welcome, Ford.
Thank you.
And Carmen Segarra is to my right here. She's the National Policy and Outreach Chair for Hispanic Bar Association. Welcome. Thanks for being here. So this is basically Obama's deficit plan will have a $1.5 trillion tax cuts. That's what FoxNews.com live is about. FoxNews.com rather article there leading the front page there on FoxNews.com. Ford, what do you think about this whole plan? What you know of it so far?
Well, as of what we know, I don't think it's really designed to pass. It's designed to make Republicans look bad and perpetuate class warfare. I think, former Michigan Governor Granholm made a great point, a Democrat I might add, made a great point saying, hey, we're engaged in a global war on jobs. And frankly, what the president's proposing here is more tax spending and regulating, and it's not really designed to deal with the current global economy. And I think I understand what he's saying with the Buffett Rule, but we saw this in 2009, and a similar thing didn't pass a democratically controlled Senate. So the Budget Committee really has a lot to work with, and hopefully we can get this done. But $1.5 trillion, that's the triggers. That's what we're expected to get done. We got to do better than that because the Americans are at risk here.
Well, also, I think the president's going to shoot for another $447 billion, or at least a $2 trillion, because he's trying to make room for the jobs plan. One thing you said, though, that's going to be catchphrase for the next week, I'm sure, is going to be the Buffett Rule. When I first read it, I thought it was the Buffet Rule, but apparently it has to do with Warren Buffett, who is one of Obama's supporters, and he's a gazillionaire. And he made the comment that he pays more in taxes, or pays less in percentage taxes than his secretary, which irritated a lot of folks. So, Carmen, why don't you answer to what Ford was saying?
Look, the Buffett Rule essentially is pointing out a real truth in America, which is that the middle class is getting squeezed tax-wise, and it's getting squeezed job-wise, and it's getting squeezed wage-wise. And it is true. I think, wealthy individuals make more than $1 million. They are paying less on an effective tax rate basis than middle-class people are. I think it's a good proposal. I think the president's combined proposal is actually a $4 trillion deficit reduction plan, and it is actually a jobs creation plan, and it is a definite plan, which is all of those things. We're seeing none of that from the Republicans. So I think, Obama's looking at his 40% approval rating, and he's looking at Congress, which has right now a 12% approval rating, and is saying, you know what? I think I have the better hand on this one. So, whatever Congress is saying, people are absolutely not listening to and are discounting completely. So
I hear Ford in here wanting to get a word in.
Carmen, I think what you're saying, though, is it's a very populist-sounding plan, but it's also a very job-killing plan, okay? Because essentially, we are taxing to spend, and if we keep that going, there's not going to be much left to tax. So when corporations and individuals, small business owners go to hire, they're going to have less to hire people with. This is not a good idea. There's some other items in here that are definitely worthy, talking about tax code reform and closing the loopholes, but, taxing the wealthy who are actually hiring hiring everybody so we can spend more is not really a great long-term plan. This is more of a political Band-Aid to win an election and not actually fix the situation.
Okay, I got to ask you, though, because one of the numbers that we kept being bandied around about a year ago, even less than a year ago, was the $200,000 mark or the $250,000 mark. It's got to sit better with Republicans that it's now at the $1 million mark, which is what they were kind of lobbying for in the first place. So why isn't that a good thing?
This is definitely better than going after $250,000 because now you're really going after small business owners, which are the driving engine of the economy. I do think, though, at the same time, a lot of the millionaires are going to wind up being taxed more, and because they're part of corporations, which is where Mitt Romney was right. He was wrong to say that corporations are people, but they are comprised of people, and they're going to pass that along in the overhead, and we're going to see this in the hiring practices. This is going to look good initially, but it's a bad long-term plan.
Yeah, I mean, Carmen, I think he makes a good point. And actually, I had conversations with a couple of small business owners over the weekend, and both of them were in the camp of Obama must go kind of thing. Because you're saying, listen, I pay Social Security tax, but the Social Security tax I pay that you see in your paycheck, I have to pay another one to the government. So I'm paying double. And so to tax the small business owners is probably going to end up reducing the middle class because they won't feel generous in employing people.
Well, the truth of the matter is that the middle class is being reduced because big corporations are going abroad and are hiring abroad and are growing abroad. You need to help and motivate and stimulate big corporations to create jobs here in the U.S. because the totality of jobs that can be created by a big corporation outnumbers vastly the number of jobs that can be created by small businesses.
Carmen, you make a real good point about corporations going overseas and abroad. The reason for that is because there's no certainty in our tax code and there's no certainty in our regulations. I agree with you. We need to come up with a sort of post-Cold War ideology on how to deal with keeping jobs in America. We are engaged in a global war on jobs. As soon as the wall fell and the Cold War ended, 2 billion more people came online and we're vying for decent wage jobs. We have to find a way to bring certainty in there because nobody's going to hire when they don't know what they're going to pay and they don't know how they're going to be regulated and further taxed. I agree with you, Carmen, to an extent.
Now, I'm going to ask you something that came there's an editorial that appeared in the Chicago Tribune basically saying to Obama, it's better for you not to run. The mind feeling, though, is that because he will no longer have to pay attention to the Republicans' debate, he won't have to basically run for president in his fourth year as president. What do you think of that, Ford? As sort of a solution to everything, I mean, and the fact that came out of a Chicago paper, his own hometown.
Well, I know it came out of the Chicago paper, and I think it's a great read. It really raises some interesting questions within his own party. Democrats talk about struggle within the Republican Party between the grassroots and the establishment. We're seeing this in the Democratic Party. A lot of people want to abandon President Obama, but they can't because if they do, they realize that they're admitting defeat and they're giving the GOP a further leg up in the battle for the White House. It's something to think about, and the president, if he really wants to be serious about America and putting America forward, he may consider this.
Yeah. Carmen, what do you think about that?
Look, the number one factor in deciding whether Obama is going to be able to keep his jobs is the status of the economy the 2 quarters prior to the election. Sure. Every single American election has been decided this way. It hasn't been decided by the politics, the presentation, the one-liners. It's been decided by the status of the economy. The problem for the Republicans is that the timing is not working out for them, and they have their backs up against the wall. We are in a situation where we really do need to present solutions now because of the larger scheme of things in the world economy. And if we don't put a solution now, then we are really going to get left behind as a country. That works in Obama's favor because the stimulus needs to happen now, and that will create the jobs going into next year that will turn around the economy and will win him the election. And it's the Republicans' own fault for getting themselves into this situation because they never worked with the president to get the U.S. out of this mess earlier. They were the party of no.
But isn't that the Democrats' mantra that the Republicans didn't work with the president? I mean, the Republicans, I think Ford can probably say the same thing that, Obama didn't work with the Republicans. I mean, everybody's pointing their finger at each other.
Well, we didn't get to this situation just overnight. This has been going on over the last 30 years based on compromise, based on political convenience, not compromise based on wise compromise. And essentially, both parties are to blame. But you can't tell me that the Republicans didn't work with the president when the president shut them out over Obamacare. This is not true. This is partisan politics. And once again, the president has decided to take it to the people, lock out the Republicans, make them look like a do-nothing Congress just so he can win when he's not actually provided any new solutions to the problem. He's going back to anachronistic, outdated ideas that are not going to work in this new global order.
Yeah, you know, speaking of time frame, now Carmen brought up that the time frame is in Obama's favor because he has another year to try to make the economy work. But is the time frame also in the Republicans' favor is that they can stall? They can stall and play politics until the time's for the economy and say, hey, look at, you know, because they've got Perry and Romney, both men who can boast that they've created jobs.
I don't know that stalling is a great move for the Republicans, okay? Because if the president is doing the right thing, the Republicans will pay the price at the ballot box. That's the bottom line. And Republicans have to realize this. They have to look for wise compromise and put the people of, you know, the American lives before any sort of electoral gains. And if they do that, they'll do well at the ballot box in 2012.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to go to Washington, D.C. because the president of the United States is going to be delivering his remarks on his vision for a balanced budget approach to reducing our deficit and living within our means, and announces his recommendations to the Joint Committee on Deficit Reduction. Just what we're talking about today. Our Wendell Goler is live at the White House. Ford, since you're in Washington, D.C. as well, I want to let you to comment on the numbers that Wendell Goler put up there. And I have to say I was wrong because when I was talking about, you know, we're talking about the $1 million, the $250,000 range is still in play because of the Bush-era tax cuts that he's going to allow to expire. So basically, it is going after those people with $250,000. But what do you think of all those bullet points and what that may or may not bode for the Republicans and their strategy?
Again, I think that we have to really not dance around the problem with Social Security and Medicare. We really have to, instead of cutting around the edges, which is what the president proposes, we have to strengthen them and put them back. And with respect to the tax code, if we don't know when we're going to be taxed and when we're not going to be taxed, whether you're a corporation, a small business owner, or an individual, there's too much uncertainty, and you're always looking over your shoulder. We have to have certainty, and if you can go after tax code reform in a meaningful way, close those loopholes and provide certainty, I think he's going to be a lot more successful. But this plan is not designed to pass. It's designed to win an election and make the Republicans look bad by making the GOP House look like a do-nothing Congress.
Carmen?
I think the plan could work as designed. Absolutely. I mean, why not? And the thing is, it's very specific in the tax loopholes that it's seeking to cut in the way that it's looking to do it. I mean, it's mentioning, the private jets. It's mentioning, ticking all the right spots. Medicare cuts will be to both beneficiaries and providers, with beneficiaries paying in much later.
But that's exactly why it's starting to look like a campaign strategy rather than a strategy to really reduce the deficit.
Well, there's two things. I mean, is it a campaign strategy? Absolutely. Is it going to work? Yes, of course. But is it a realistic plan that if we implement it, we can see some progress? I think so.
Yeah.
And the question is really that two things. One, I don't think it goes far enough because, and I'll just use one example. You mentioned the private jets. Well, why not the yachts? You're talking about private plane ownership. I can see every private jet owner selling their plane and leasing it back and using the money to buy a yacht. It's like,
right.
Well, let's be honest. If jet owners and yacht owners were the only reason for this sort of deficit in the tax cut, I would run up to the Capitol Hill right now and say, all of you, give up your corporate jets.
No,
that's not going to change. That's not going to change $14.5 trillion. I mean, it really isn't.
No, it's symbolic of the fact that, we have, since 1929, this is the biggest gap between those who have and those who have not. 46% of America's children live in poverty, and we have people who can afford to buy yachts and planes, and then we have to make choices.
Let's just go for the 46 million children who live in poverty, and one of the leading indicators of a child living in poverty is there's not a father in the household. Now we get back to issues of morality and ethics because, from a black person's standpoint, it's like 70% of black children are born out of wedlock. This is the thing that drives people insane, is that you can't just look at the numbers, but the reasons behind the numbers are not always the things that are the best things to focus on. And that's one of the issues. And I understand what you're saying, but one of the reasons why when you make these kinds of cuts, and you can both talk to this, is that you can't legislate the morality that that motivates someone either to hire someone or not hire them, to increase their employee base or not to increase their employee base. They're going to be watching out after their own self-interest.
Which is why you need to use money and the redistribution of taxes as an incentive. For example, one thing that's not on the table, it hasn't been put on the table by the Republicans or the Democrats, that should be on the table is VAT tax. VAT tax taxes consumption. So you know what? If you go out and you spend a lot of money, you're going to pay a lot of money in taxes.
But you just spend less money. Then you're going to get...
but then you get... But you're incentivizing people to do the right thing, which is to, on a personal level, to save money, and then you're not penalizing those families that have, we have 46 million children in poverty. They should not be paying taxes. They should be having more money available to buy better quality food for their kids.
Yeah, Ford, answer some of this because I know that you're probably...
Well, I think Carmen makes a good point about tax code reform. I think that we need to come up with a better system than what we have. But I will say this, again, we have to remember we're in a global economy and there's a lot of realities going around the world that are now starting to be felt in the United States. And the fact is that some people will just do the job because they want to live. And we have to recognize that there's some economic downturn elsewhere and the fact that people will do it cheaper. If we want to bring jobs to America, we have to bring certainty to the tax code. And Carmen's definitely proposed one way to do it, but I think we need to be looking at more of that, more ways to bring about jobs and to bring about and better the lives of Americans through tax code reform, not dancing around the edges. We know that Social Security and Medicare are on their way to bankruptcy. How do we strengthen them to put it forward so that we have good benefits for the people and the jobs? I just don't know, and neither party's really going there yet.
Well, and actually, you bring up a very good point because one of the articles in the Washington Post this morning talked about the Republican frontrunners and the difference between them, and that these are two men that are miles apart as far as East is from the West in terms of their other strategies, in terms of their personalities, in terms of where they're from. What would be the best scenario for the Republican Party and for the American people? Because here you've got Rick Perry and Mitt Romney, one really representing sort of the old guard traditional GOP, and the other representing sort of the Tea Partier kind of element. I gotta say, and I didn't think about this until I read the article, but my goodness, the Republicans are really in a quandary in terms of which one actually would be better to put forward and which one would better serve the United States. Ford, what do you think?
Well, I think both of them are great candidates, and I think both of them can defeat President Obama. My advice to Rick Perry is, hey, stick to your guns, but you've got to tone down the volatile rhetoric. You've got to be a little bit less like Rambo and a little bit more like James Bond, precise and accurate with your words. You've got to make inroads with establishment Republicans and independents. And if you can do that and you can win the Florida primary, chances are you'll be the nominee. My advice to Mitt Romney is slightly different. You've got a great polished resume. You've got great private sector experience. Now what you've got to do is you've got to resonate with the grassroots a little bit more, and you can't be so stiff on the stump. Saying 2 + 2 is 4 just because it's a fact is not a good thing. Look, Rick Perry is essentially the person that GOP primary voters want to take to the prom. Mitt Romney is the person that GOP primary voters sort of settle on when they marry. The question for Perry is, can he become the person that GOP primary voters want to marry before they settle on Romney? And that's really the big question for both of them.
Okay, so is Perry the one you have the affair with, and then Romney the one you actually marry?
I wouldn't say the affair. They both married their high school sweethearts. So
okay.
We're just saying Perry's the bad boy, but sometimes he's his own worst enemy, and he has to show himself a stick-to-itiveness to stick to his guns, but to be more appealing to a broader swath, including establishment Republicans, independents, Hispanics, and women.
Yeah, you know how we love our bad boys, too. Okay, this is a whole different scenario. Ford, I want to thank you for being here. Ford O'Connell, chairman of the Civic Forum PAC and co-founder of Project Virginia. Thank you very much for being here. We got to say goodbye to you right now, but I'll let Carmen answer you when you're gone, so you can't answer back, I guess. Sorry about that.